All right, guys. So from our last class, we looked at all of the features of wireless networking, right? Including things like encryption, security, settings such as the SSID and so on. But I want somebody to tell me, if I wanted to find out how the way to access my router right now on my current system that I'm using, that you see in my screen for, can anybody tell me what is the procedure that we'll go through to get that done? There are 3 different methods you can use. So whatever method you can let me know right now.
Can you repeat that?
I would like to know right now, we're going to do the practical. We're going to try to access my modem or my wireless router to configure my wireless network. All right. I want you guys to tell me what is the first step. How do I access my router? What is the first step in gaining access to my wireless device?
Well, there's a sticker at the bottom of the router. You look on it. There's the IP address.
Okay, I'm assuming. Okay, I'm looking at the bottom of mine right now. Don't worry if you can see me or not. But that sticker is not there. That sticker has long. Well, it's there, but it's long been erased. So no. But I'm connected to it right now. I know that I'm connected to it. The current system that I'm working on is in fact connected to it. Will you give me another method?
Okay, you would open a command prompt.
Okay.
You would use ipconfig.
All right, let's go. We're gonna do MD.
And then
across, right? And then we would use what command?
ipconfig.
All right, nice. Enter.
Sorry. Slash
ipconfig. I didn't type it in right. /all. Okay. /all. Actually, we didn't even need the all for that one, but that's fine. The all gave us a lot more information.
Yeah.
What are we looking for right now?
Your default gateway.
So your default gateway. So let's scroll up because the all give us quite a bit, and we need to make sure we're looking at the correct one. So LAN, wireless adapter. Oh, no, that's wireless LAN. Okay, there we go. All right, so I have a default gateway here. I can see, what is that first one? FE08 ::1%26. What is that? Everybody can see that, right?
Yeah, IPv6.
That is my IP address in IPv6. But we're keeping things simple. We're gonna use IP version 4. So the IPv4 address is 192.168.1.1. Everybody see that, right?
Yeah.
All right. Clyde, since you're doing such a good job walking me through, what's the next step? What do I do with that now? The default gateway.
Okay, you would use that address. You'll open a browser of your choice.
All right. So if you have open up a browser of my choice.
Yeah.
For that, I'm going to use a new Google Incognito window. Let me know if you can still see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Verify. Yes, you can. All right. Okay, and then we will go to that address. So 192.168.1.1 and go. All right. So this screen that we see, and it may vary depending on what your default gateway is, what device your default gateway is. But as we can see, that is actually the account access for my Digicel modem. All right. So at this point, you would need the default or the currently set username and password. So if it has been set already, you would need what it has been set to. And unfortunately, the sticker at the bottom of my device come out, so we're not even going to that option. But if it's a brand new device, it should have the password. If it has a password located on the sticker at the bottom of the device. All right. So Clyde, you were actually right in that one. I just wanted a different method of accessing the default gateway. All right. So I put in my account username and my password. All right, and log in to take me to the actual back end of the configuration settings for my default gateway. In this case, it would be my modem device, which acts as a switch, which also acts as a router. All right, so we have all of those configuration settings here. These are, let me make just a second. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so let's go through the settings that we see here. We have a number of tabs at the top, first of all. And again, just to emphasize that if you're doing that at your home on your device, the configuration screen may be different depending on your device and what it looks like. All right. But mine has the tabs at the top, right? So you have main tabs at the top. And then you have the sub options along the side. So we're going to go through it, the main elements at least, in detail. The first tab shows the status of the device, right? Or the status of every aspect of the device. We see here, the first section, WAN information. What does WAN stand for again?
Wide area network.
Right, wide area network. So that is information about the wider network that we're connected to, which essentially is the internet. So it gives us access to the internet. Now, these we're not too concerned with. These settings are typically set by your internet service provider, your ISP, and you don't want to change those settings, especially if everything works. All right. My device has VoIP capability, so if it was configured or if we needed to do anything there, that is where we would do it. Unfortunately, I do not use that function. So I'm gonna just jump over that. This one, the next section, WLAN information. What is WLAN?
Wide local area network.
Wide local area network? You sure? So WLAN is wireless LAN. So it's really LAN, but it covers any devices that are connected to it wirelessly as well. So in that particular device, the WLAN refers to everything dealing with the wireless network. So here you can see I actually have two wireless networks. I have, well, two different SSIDs. The first one is Digital Solutions Fiber. The second one is Digital Solutions Guest, right? And pretty much because we're in the status tab, all we do here is it shows us information about the various parts of the router. So the wireless LAN aspect, that is the wireless LANs that we have actually. That's their status. And yeah, that's pretty much it. SSIDs, status. Then we have smart Wi-Fi coverage. When we were doing the chapter in the last class, we learned that you can actually configure how much power your router puts into broadcasting the signal, right? So in other words, if I wanted to ensure that the signal just gives my office, but not outside on the road, I could actually make some configurations in there to restrict the coverage at a particular distance. All right. But again, those are more advanced features, and we're not going to go through any of those. As you can see, I don't have any of those settings configured. Next section we have is ETH port information. What do you think it means by ETH? For short, you can see it on the side there. But anyway, ETH will be short for Ethernet, right? And that part is really the switch part of the device, right? Because it's a wireless modem from Digicel. It has a 4-port switch built in and also wireless routing capability. So it's a modem, a wireless router, and a switch. Okay. This part, the if port information, shows me the information about the ports, the 4 ports that are on it. And you can see that there is only one device connected right now that is currently running. Okay, and that would be my server. The next section is DHCP information. What is DHCP? Can anybody remember? Somebody tell me what is DHCP?
Dynamic host.
Dynamic host control protocol. I'm more interested in knowing what is its job? What does DHCP do?
It automatically assigns IP address.
Right, DHCP is the
to-
feature. Yeah, that is the feature that assigns IP addresses to devices on the network. So you can see here all of the devices that typically connect to my network and their DHCP assignments. So you can see here my phone, my server, my wife's phone, my other computers, right? All have their IP address assigned by DHCP, right? It also shows me the MAC address. Everybody remember what the MAC address is? The MAC address is the ID that uniquely identifies every device or every network connected device, every network card really in the world, right? So no two MAC addresses should be the same. And it also shows the device type and how much time remaining on the current assignment. Okay. Optical information. This page just shows information on the fiber optics because it's actually a fiber optic modem. So again, the optical information is the fiber optics, the connection, how everything is running. Yeah. Battery information. I don't have a battery on that device. Device information. Well, that's where we find out what the device is. That's the model, right? What it is, the serial number. So basic information about the device. User device information, again. Information about devices connected or currently connected. All right. And service provisioning. All right. That will be more advanced. Okay, so let's go through our actual configuration settings now. One, we never need to do anything with, again, because the one part is typically handled by your ISP, and typically changes that you make in your one might result in your, well, your one settings might result in your internet connection not stopping working. All right, so you typically want to stay away from that. LAN is the first place where we want to go to make any configurations. And there we would actually configure how our network runs. So we can see the primary IP address, which is the IP address of our default gateway. That's the IP address that we use to access the device. If I wanted to have a different address for my network, let's say I wanted all of my devices to have an IP address starting with 125.168.5. whatever, right? I would actually make that change there to the primary address and all of, well, the primary address and subnet mask if necessary. We went through all the subnet mask works, right? And all of the devices on the network would get a corresponding IP address, all right? The DHCP server configuration basically tells you whether you want to enable DHCP functionality for that device. So let's say we had that device, but I had another router on the network that I wanted to be the one to assign the IP addresses. I would essentially disable DHCP on that device and enable it on the other one, right? But again, because that is the primary device, that is the one that is handling DHCP for my entire network, we have it enabled, all right? And again, how you would configure, actually, this is where you would configure the IP addresses on the network for the additional devices, right? So I can assign IP addresses from 192.168.1.2 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to .254. And typically the IP address is assigned for 3 days. That's what the least time refers to. All right. We don't have any settings for primary and secondary DNS server because it will use whatever your ISP has assigned. But let's say I wanted to use Google DNS servers for sure, then I would put in 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4, which is the Google DNS servers. I'm actually going to leave that out for the time being because my internet connection looks fine as it is, including my DNS. But in the event you did want to do that, that is where you would put it in. So it's pretty much the same settings that you would configure on your device, right? For DHCP, that would be the equivalent settings here. And well, if you add secondary DHCP. Then we have DHCP static IP configuration. And again, static IPs would be the opposite of using DHCP. So if you did not enable DHCP, in order for your computer to connect to the network, you would have to assign a static IP, right? As you can see, we do have DHCP enabled, so we do not have any static IP address configurations. But I could have, for instance, set my personal computer as 192.168.1.5, my cell phone as 1.6, my wife's computer as 1.7, and if it's static, those IP addresses would never change, right? Anytime the devices come onto the network, that is what would be assigned to them. But of course, with that, you run the risk of IP address conflicts, and that would cause 2 devices to essentially fall off the network. Any questions so far?
No, sir.
All right. I'm not going too fast for anybody, right, everybody? Everybody good? Okay. All right, let's move on. IP version 6. So as you can see, as you saw from the IP config, actually, my device does support IP version 6. You can see it's IP version 6 address assignment here, and all of the other settings for IP version 6. But we know that IPv6 is confusing. It has a very long IP address, and it's designed so that the world never runs out of IP addresses, no matter if everybody has 20 devices. So even saying a single IP version 6 address can be a mouthful. But pretty much this is where you would go to configure everything related to IPv6, right? If it is that you were using that primarily. For the most part, all of those default settings work, so you have nothing to do here. The settings for IPv6 are very similar to IP version 4 in that you can set static IPs, right? So that is the static IP configuration screen, where if you had set any static IPs, they would show up. Port mapping, again, you could map certain ports, like port 80 for internet connections and port 25 for mail, for incoming mail or outgoing mail, I can't remember. But certain devices do need access to certain ports. If you ever do need to map any ports or forward any ports, which we'll get to in a little bit, you would know about it, and then you would come here and configure it. You would be given instructions to pull in all of these values to get it to work. Ipfilter. So one of the features of that particular device is I can configure a filter to basically prohibit some IP addresses in the WAN from accessing the LAN, right? So in other words, I could have somebody on the network accessing the internet, but not have access to the network resources, okay? You could do it in a blacklist way or whitelist way. So basically, if you're using blacklist, then the items you configure here, the IP address you configure here will be blacklisted, meaning they will not be able to access your LAN. If you do it as a whitelist, it will work in reverse. Cancel that. It will work in reverse, and only the IP addresses for the devices you configure here will have access to the LAN. All right. And then you have hybrid where you can set it yourself, whether it's blacklist or whitelist for either one. So it's like a security feature. The real meat of what we want to come to now, which is actually our wireless LAN configurations, is on the WLAN for wireless LAN, right? So let's look at the basic configuration. You can see I actually have 2 networks running from that device. I can actually configure additional networks. So let's say I wanted to have a personal home network now. This one is for my business. This one is for my guests of my business. But let's say I wanted to have another one for my home, because I do have a home-based business. I could create another network or another SSID, right? That will give me access to that network on the same device, right? And you can see the configuration settings here. So for Digital Solutions Fiber, which is my work network, right? This is the SSID. You can change the name or the SSID right there. We can enable SSID or disable it again. That is the feature where it would be shown, I believe. Oh no, actually you could disable, that is where you would disable the network. So I could disable one from right there. If I was to disable it, it would actually not be available to connect to. We see the number of associated devices that are actually linked to it. Broadcast SSID is our first security feature here. We can actually turn this off. And if we disable it, then devices within the vicinity would not see Digital Solutions Fiber as an SSID. You might see, depending on your device, it might show you unknown network, but you would have to know the SSID in order for you to connect to it. So when you try to connect to an unknown network, it will ask you for the SSID first. You will have to put in the correct SSID, and then it would ask you for the password, right? And without any one of those, you would not be able to connect to the network. So you could disable SSID broadcasts, and it would be one level of security for your wireless network. All right. I'm not 100% sure what is WMM now. Let me see. Oh, WMM. That just allows it to work in N. 802, 801.1N. So let's leave that alone. All right. So our authentication mode basically tells us what type of security that we have on our wireless network. Now, it may be different. It may be called something different on your router. It may be called authentication type or security type or something like that. It may not necessarily be called authentication mode, but if you see the options for WPA, WPA2, WEP, right, or none, right, or in my case, open, meaning no password, that would be the type of authentication that you would actually be using. The encryption is the type of encryption that is used, and different authentication modes have different encryption types, right? And WPA, for instance, on my current settings, that is where I have my password, right? So if I were to uncheck high right now, you would see the password to access my wireless network for my office. Okay. Enable WPS. WPS, can anybody tell me what is WPS? You may have seen it somewhere before. So WPS actually stands for Wi-Fi protected setup. And that is actually a feature that you can use. Let's say you have one network and you do not want to give a guest that comes into your office or your home your password. You could actually enable WPS, and most of the devices that support Wi-Fi protected setup have a little WPS button on the device, or you can see here, I can actually start it from the back end here if I have it enabled. And what that will do is it will give you a short interval, probably about a minute or 2 minutes, where anybody that's actually trying, or any device that's trying to connect to your network, will be given a temporary space of time where they will be allowed to connect without a password and be configured and gain access to the network. All right, it's called Wi-Fi protected setup, and it's available on most routers nowadays, but mine, as you can see, is disabled. Right, because that would enable somebody who has access to your router to just press a button and gain access to your network. So it can be considered a security feature, but also a security risk depending on how you use it, the location of your device, and so on. All right. Any questions on our basic configuration here?
No.
All right. Okay. All right. Let's just continue going through. But this is really what you would need, the basic configuration. This is what you need to configure a wireless network, right? This is everything that you need to configure your wireless network right there. Your SSID, your security, your encryption, your password. And yeah. All right, let's go to the advanced configuration. So sorry, before I do that, you can see the settings there. So that one is Digital Solutions Fiber. If I were to click on the second one, this would actually be the settings for Digital Solutions Guest. That one I can show you the password to. All right. So we have the advanced functions, the advanced configuration settings. Typically, we don't need to do anything here. Let me see. This is transmit power, by the way, that TX typically stands for transmission. So right now, my device is sending the signal as far as it can. If I only wanted it to have a shorter coverage, let's say within my office or within a shorter, let's say half the range, then I could actually bring that down to 50%. I could probably manually, you know. Anyway, but yeah, we're keeping it at 100 for now. Regulatory domain, the rules for communication and so on, Caribbean, and all of the rest pretty much automatic. Let's just continue going through the settings. Automatic Wi-Fi shutdown. So I can actually, again, that's not a feature that you might see on every single device, but I can actually configure my Wi-Fi to go off at a certain time and come on at a certain time. So let's say I wanted the device to come on and start transmitting Wi-Fi at 8 o'clock in the morning and stop transmitting at 12 o'clock in the night. I could actually configure that here and have it done automatically. It's not a typical feature, but it's there. And again, Wi-Fi coverage, again, that's where you could configure more advanced coverage settings as to how far your device will actually transmit. Okay. Again, I have no caps on mine. It's just at the default settings. So that actually is your wireless LAN settings. Again, the basic configuration is all you need for everything we spoke about in chapter 22, right? Configuring your wireless network. But since we're here, we have 3 more minutes before we have to potentially connect back. Let's just continue going through the settings. Security. So we saw the wireless LAN specific security, but we have a few other security features, right? One, firewall. I can configure firewall security on the network. So in other words, what that would mean is I can configure my device as a hardware firewall to protect my network from outside intrusion. All right. Again, we don't really use that. I could filter by IP addresses or even MAC addresses here. So I could actually go to my status, pull up my DHCP information, find an offending device, let's say a particular person I didn't want on my network, this person right there. I could find a MAC address, which is right here, right? And by going into my security options here and setting a MAC filter, I can tell my router, never, ever, ever let that device on my network again. All right? That would be setting it on the blacklist. I could conversely have my network so secure that using the same method, I go here, pull up the DHCP information, find the MAC address for all of my devices, and configure it here as whitelist. And only these devices with those MAC addresses will be allowed to connect to my network. No other devices will be allowed to connect. So you can come, you can have the password, you can have the SSID, you can have the cable to plug into the router. If I blacklist you by MAC address, your device will not get a configuration, will not get configured on my network. All right. So that is additional security settings here. Again, more security you can have. So the MAC filter and the wireless LAN MAC filter, again, I guess that's just wireless specific, right? We can configure parental controls. Again, we know what parental controls is. I'm not going to go for that in detail. You can configure what sites you can access, what times you can access them, and so on. Device access control, again, that configures access to the device. We do have the ability to connect to that device over the internet. So you would configure all of that here. All right, guys, we have less than 1 minute remaining. So we're going to take a break here. And then we're just going to come back to finish go through those settings, and I'll take any questions that you have then. All right. Everybody go with it?
Okay,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, so take a 5-minute break and we'll come back at 6:30. See you guys in a bit.